Okay, so let's begin. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this video presentation that's part of a collection of presentations delivered to prospective students for their development of their knowledge and their skills and for informational purposes as possible students in the future here at the Graduate School of Education. Today we're going to talk about and explore a particular kind of communication skill. It's one that I think does not get enough attention by people in society, and especially in professional positions. I'm speaking of the process, the scenario where you stand up in front of a group of people in a room, in a theater, and you deliver a speech or presentation. It's called in general public speaking presentation skills. And today I'm going to present to you my perspectives on this important skill and a few strategies that you can use to make your very next presentation even better. My name is Robert Gordyn. I'm an academic English instructor here in the Graduate School of Education, Nazarbayev University. And along with my day job as an English instructor, I also have a very keen interest and have had a keen interest in public speaking for many, many years. And today I'd like to share with you some of my insights, some of my training, and some of my perspectives on this very, very useful and important communication skill. So let's get started first by reviewing the outline of our talk, of our time together today. Number one, I say, why is public speaking such a big deal? I'll give you a few reasons why I think it is a very, very important and useful skill to have in your life, in your studies, and in your career. Number two, what is involved? What does it take to learn about and become a better speaker? I'll lay out a few examples there of what you need to do to become a good speaker. Number three is the how question. Okay, you've decided to become a better presenter. How do you do it? I'll give you a few directions you can go to put yourself on that path. Number four, we'll identify two barriers that often stand in the way of people involving themselves and learning about, even thinking about standing up and speaking in front of people. And finally, number five is the practical part of our talk. That is a few techniques, three in total, three particular strategies I'll talk to you about to make your next presentation even better. So that's our plan, our outline for today. We'll work our way through these in the next little while. Then we'll turn it over. Any questions or comments you might have on what you've heard today or anything having to do with public speaking and presentation skills. Then I'll wrap up with a summary, a review of what we've talked about today, and a little final thought that you can take away from this presentation. So let's get started with the first question. Why is public speaking such a big deal? As a kind of, a mode of, what I often call a genre of communication, it is very, very influential / powerful mode of communication. Why is that? Two reasons. Number one has to do with what I call the ratio factor. That is, you alone on stage in front of an audience. You're speaking to perhaps 10 people, perhaps 100, at times, maybe even 1,000 or more. You are one person and you are informing your audience of hundreds perhaps. you have the potential of informing a great many people about your topic. Perhaps it's to talk about science and education. Perhaps it's very informative. It could be inspirational kind of talk. And who knows, without your talk, you might even change people's lives for the better. So because of this ratio factor, one person speaking to very, very many, you have the potential to impact people, a huge number of people at the same time. So for that reason, this ratio factor, I think, is very, very significant and what makes it so powerful. And the second is what I consider to be authority. When you're sitting in the audience, when I'm sitting in the audience and someone comes to speak, I assume that person is speaking from authority. He or she is an expert in a field. They have a story to tell. They have information that can help me. So there's this image of authority that's very much a part of the public speaking genre. Now you notice I put a little asterisk after authority. And this is one qualification here. Authority is presumed, but it might not be maintained. That is, if that person comes on stage and speaks very poorly and or doesn't seem to have that knowledge you think they have, they're not going to maintain that authority throughout that entire talk. So authority is conditional on that person being a very articulate and confident speaker and having something of substance to say to that audience. So for these two reasons, this ratio factor of 1 to 10 or 100, and authority, the authoritative voice that we think exists when someone takes the stage and speaks to you. That's why I think public speaking is such a big deal. It can reach out to hundreds or thousands at the same time. And a practical note, as a possible students, graduate students here in the Graduate School of Education or elsewhere, for you as a student, there are also some very practical benefits. Presentations will be an important part of your studies and what's expected of you. You will be making presentations as part of your program of studies in different courses. In my English language classes, students make a presentation either in class or via video. You also will be called upon to make a thesis proposal in presentation form. And at the end of your work, at the end of your studies, there will be that formal presentation. It could be a thesis presentation overview, or even a thesis defense in front of your advisors, faculty, fellow students. So again, as a graduate student, it is a big deal to be a good speaker. So there are multiple benefits for students of public speaking. Second topic, what is public speaking all about? What does it involve? Well, it just so happens that there are three skill areas of public speaking. And it's interesting because in languages, we have these skill areas: reading, writing, listening, speaking, grammar. We have these nice, neat little categories that we can get into. Easy for the students to take in that information, and easy for the instructor, easier to organize all these skills and present them to the students. So what are the three? There are three skill areas in public speaking. What are they? Number one, what we call delivery. That is you on stage delivering your presentation. And there it's all about what your audience sees and what they hear. So delivery, we're going to get into some detail, and I'll give you some examples of what's involved in each one of these in terms of skill development. So number one is delivery, you on stage. Number two, content. What's your topic all about? What kind of words and sentences are you crafting to deliver that speech? And number three, structure. the organization of your speech, both in terms of the big picture and within a speech, like within an essay, there are internal structures as well that we can learn. So those are the three skill areas of public speaking. Let's look at examples of what's within each of these. In terms of delivery, there's vocals, pace, rate, pitch, tone, using volume, using it in different ways at different times. Vocal variety is a common word that comes out of public speaking. Gesturing with your hands. There's effective ways of gesturing and not so effective ways that you can learn. Eye contact, a big one, especially in a big room. You want to make eye contact. You want to connect and communicate well with your audience. And there are skills involved there. Body language. You know, you probably heard that a lot of communication goes on without even saying anything. That is how we move our body, how we walk across the stage. This deserves some special attention. Stage movement. That is, you're on a stage, it's always good to move rather than stay at the lectern or at the computer table. And there are important ways that you can move around that stage that's purposeful rather than random. Facial expressions and how you tie that into your topic. So those are a few examples of what goes on within the delivery skill of public speaking. Content, what goes on in content? There's your topic, the main topic, subtopics, categories, something like I had in my outline. Words, what kind of words are you using? Are they big, complex words or short words that are very clear and easy to understand? How about the use of jargon in your speech? Is that necessary? Part of content. Volume. Here I don't mean volume coming out of your mouth. I mean, how much information are you offering to your audience? This is a very important part, a frequent source of errors. And this is going to be one of our strategies we investigate today, the amount of information you put out within your time limit for a speech. Humor. Yes, in academic circles and across a whole range of public speaking environments, the odd chuckle, the odd humorous anecdote can be very effective. But again, it has to be carefully planned and strategic. Keywords that keep the audience going, those jargon words, keywords that are part of the main point of your talk. Sentences. For my language students, where we focus a lot on writing, there's that challenge, there's the reminder to students to avoid super long sentences. Try to keep them shorter and to the point and more understandable. The same goes for public speaking. In fact, even more, we need to control the length of sentences. What's structure all about? Well, there's the basic organization. Intro, body, conclusion. Yes, that makes up a speech preparation as well. An outline, like I've shown you at the beginning here, not only up front, but at times repeating that outline throughout your talk. The introduction and conclusion, two very important parts of your speech. The introduction and conclusion each has a structure within the big picture of the basic organization. Road mapping, this is a way to keep your audience on track, to know where you've been in terms of your topic and where you're going in the next few minutes. We call it road mapping. The use of acronyms as a way for audiences to remember what you've talked about, taking a simple word like read and having each letter, R-E-A-D, stand for one of the topics in your speech. They'll remember that. That's a very useful structural tool. And Q&A, a big and important and a very dangerous part of your talk. And there is a whole collection of techniques within Q&A that can make it very effective for you and your audience. So that's it. Delivery, content, and structure. That's what public speaking all about. This is the big collection, the big toolbox of techniques in public speaking. So the next topic, how to become a good presenter. Well, there are three ways. First one, surprise, surprise, reading books and articles. This is how I partly got started. When I really got into it, I read many, many books on public speaking. It was a great way to get started and build that knowledge base. Another technique is officially training or studying public speaking for the knowledge and for the feedback. Where do you go for training? There are professional public speakers around that offer workshops around the country, perhaps, and certainly around the world that you can attend. There is another organization called Toastmasters. Perhaps you've heard of it. It is a great place to get started with public speaking. It's a very supportive and friendly environment. That's how I first got started in public speaking with Toastmasters, and I'm still off and on involved with them. It's a great place to get feedback on your speeches. They have a great program of study. Check out their syllabus. It takes you through all kinds of different kinds of speeches, and you can deliver and practice speeches often. And that reminds me of my last point, practicing. What I came to know in this industry as stage time. You can only get better at this if you get up on stage and speak over and over again and build up that experience and that confidence on stage. And goes back to feedback, getting feedback from professional speakers, from knowledgeable speakers on ways to improve your techniques. So this is a brief outline of how you can become a good presenter. Reading, training through a variety of means, and practicing is the big one. Let's talk a bit about barriers. There are two significant barriers for people who may be uncomfortable with the idea of studying public speaking or even public speaking at all. And this first photograph, I think, illustrates it all. You all know this as, that's right, the fear factor of public speaking. It's a biggie. For some people, it's anxiety time. People get very nervous about having to speak in public. And for some people, it's kind of a phobia, where it's just almost impossible for them to get up on stage. It's just too frightening for them. So fear has to be conquered. How is it conquered? Simply by getting involved. You want to do something that you're uncomfortable with? Do it. Get up on stage, speak in front of people. I guarantee you the fear will go down and your skill and confidence level will go up. So getting over the fear factor is the big one. Once you're over that, it's like learning any skill. You can accomplish it. And the other has to do with this cute little photo, what I call overconfidence. There is a good deal of overconfidence out there from professional people about their ability to speak well in public. And that comes in part from their knowledge of a topic. They can be very knowledgeable on a topic and feel that, well, I know it all. I'm going to speak very well about it. Possible, but not always likely. Another source might be, well, I speak pretty well everywhere else, so I'm sure I'm going to do well in front of a big audience. And the third one I've heard is, well, I've got these great collection of PowerPoint slides and images that I put up, and those images and the PowerPoint are going to carry me through to success, and I'll be very, very successful in this speech. Maybe, but the chances are you're not going to be that effective of a speaker unless you learn something about it. So between fear and overconfidence, these are two barriers that keep people from getting more and more involved with this skill area. So we've covered all of the perspectives that I wanted to so far. Now we're going to get into strategies, tools of the trade, 3 techniques that I've chosen from a great collection of techniques we can talk about. Strategy number 1 is we're going to focus on vocals. And this comes from which of those 3 skill areas? That's right, delivery. Remember what your audience hears and sees when you're on stage. And in particular, vocals is a big topic in itself, but I want to talk mostly about the speed at which people speak on stage. Your pace, how quickly you talk, or the pace that you use reveals plenty about who you are as a speaker. For example, if someone is speaking very, very quickly, it could be their natural way of speaking, but chances are they're speaking quickly because they're nervous, or they're not sure of themselves, or they're not sure of their material. That quick pace is a clear indication that that person may be either inexperienced or uncomfortable with speaking in public. So I'm suggesting that you practice and develop the ability to speak fairly slowly when delivering a speech. Why? Well, first there's the issue of accuracy in terms of pronunciation. And I'm thinking mostly here in terms of those students, those people who are using English as their second or third language and who may carry with them an accent. And these issues might complicate your effectiveness to pronunciate, a word correctly. So accuracy improves as the speed of your vocals go down. Tied into accuracy very much is comprehension. You want to do your best to make sure that your audience understands you. And that can be advanced significantly if you slow down your pace. So accuracy improves. The comprehension for your audience improves. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, confidence. A slow speaker suggests to me that that person is very confident, that they're articulating their argument in a very slow pace for their audience to hear and for the speaker to think about what's coming next. They're confident, they know what they're talking about, they're going to articulate their information very clearly. And one way to do that is to slow down below the level of what you would normally speak at. Now, how can you work on this? Well, there's one technique that I've learned for practicing your pace, and that is time yourself in 1 minute of your speech. Let's say you're delivering a speech and you want to work on this issue of pace. Time yourself for 1 minute of your speech. Count how many words you spoke in that minute. In my training, I've come up with these numbers that have been passed on to me for thinking about pace and the speed of your talk. If it's 120 words or less, you're operating in a fairly reasonably slow pace, a slower pace than might be normal. Anything above 160 words per minute, and you are speaking relatively quickly. So that's one technique you can use to prepare yourself for a speech to see how you're doing. I did this very test in my preparation and practice for this presentation, and I timed out for 1 minute at about 105 words for one segment and about 108 for the other. So I was speaking well below anything that the normal range and even well within the slower pace. In fact, I like to make it around 100 words per minute if possible. That changes depending on what's happening on the screen and what's happening in your talk. But in terms of vocals, think about your pace. Think about how fast you talk Try to plug these numbers into your preparation and see how it turns out. And you will be a far more articulate and a confident speaker when you take the stage. Strategy number 2 has to do with volume. This comes from the content category, skill category of public speaking. Now, by volume here, again, I don't mean your voice. I'm thinking about how much information are you passing over to your audience. It's not about the sound. It's about the amount of information you present. This is one of the most frequent missteps, errors that speakers make in terms of preparing and delivering their speech. The volume, the amount of information is too much. Avoid squeezing in too much information. Here's what one of my trainers said many years ago in talking about this issue of volume and how much you put in. He said this, he said, the more you try to squeeze in to your presentation, the more you squeeze out your audience. And that's because an audience can only take in so much information over a set period of time. Oftentimes it overwhelms them, and I experience that all the time. I don't take in a whole lot of information at once over a period of time very well. So it's challenging for your audience to take in a lot of information over the 30 or 20 or 40 minutes that you have. It puts stress on you to make sure you get all that information out there in your set period of time. As a result, you're going to speed up those vocals. Do we want to do that? No, we want to maintain a slow pace. And it's going to rush your presentation, rush through your slides, all in order to make sure you make it within that time frame, if you don't have any flexibility in that time. And sometimes at conferences, you don't. So for these reasons, the volume issue is very important to keep track of. How do you practice your volume? Well, there is a technique. It has to do with practicing and timing your presentation. Are you in sync between the pace and the amount of information you have going? If you're over the limit, reduce the volume. So you have this much time, but you have this much information to deliver. What do? Should you speed up your vocals to make sure you squeeze in all that information? No, we know it's the opposite. You should be slow and steady in your delivery in terms of vocals. So your goal is to try and reduce the amount of information that you want to put out. And we have to go through your speech, through the text of your speech, to see what can you cut back on to make sure that you speak clearly and accurately at a slow pace and still get your information across to your audience. So this is the first trick. The second point I want to make here today, all about volume. You don't want to speed up your pace, remember. You want to slow down your pace, keep it steady, and practice until you've got your information out there within that period of time, speaking slowly. It'll take some time. It may be difficult because you have important points that you want to make within a certain amount of time. But I think if we look very closely at your speech, there are ways that you can remove elements, details, maybe make more general points in order to get your point across. So practice with that volume of how much information you want to get across. And our third and final technique involves the startup, the introduction, the opening of your presentation. Why is this so important? Here's what I learned. Your audience will remember two parts about your presentation more than anything. They'll remember how you began, your introduction, and they'll remember most about your conclusion. That's human nature, what they hear first and what they hear last. So we can pay a good deal of attention to the introduction and the conclusion of your presentation. What I'd like you to consider is to be different, be creative, be memorable. You've all been to those talks. Maybe you've used this, and even I did at times when I begin my speech with, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my presentation." And what happens? Well, sometimes people go, yes, it can happen. Even I do it sometime when a speech starts in that way, which is fine. It's a very pleasant way to get your speech started, but it's ordinary. We've all heard it before. It's pleasant, it's a nice greeting, but if you want to be remembered and be a very effective public speaker, you might want to be a little more different, a little creative. What can you do to begin your speech in a different sort of way? And there are many ways. There are a few dozen ways that you can actually begin your speech that I've learned about. I'll identify 3 that you might want to consider. The first is beginning with a powerful statement, a significant statement that will kind of get the audience thinking, wow, that's interesting. It could be something on education. I was thinking, if I was delivering a talk on the trilingual language policy here in Kazakhstan, I could say something like, Kazakhstan has become a global benchmark. It's become a global leader in promoting a multilingual society by incorporating this very, very exciting and challenging trilingual language policy in the country. Isn't that fantastic to see that's going on here in Kazakhstan? That gives you some idea of what's possible in the way of a powerful statement, something related to your topic that has a big picture, perhaps a nationwide or global perspective. So a powerful statement, you could begin without even the hellos and welcome to my talks. Begin right away with a powerful statement. Second example, how about a statistic? Numbers resonate with people. 20, 30%, 40% of something. I remember some of my students are studying and writing theses on the attrition rate of new teachers in Kazakhstan, how they're spending a few years in the industry and then they're pulling out, they're quitting and going on to do something else. And I could see beginning with that number of 20 or 30% of teachers, rural or urban, getting out that significant statistic right up front and saying, wow, that's interesting. I want to hear more. So a statistic is another great way to begin your talk. And another way can be an anecdote, a personal story. In all kinds of speeches, this is very effective, even in the realm of academic type speeches where some personal reflection that you have, I can see as a graduate students reflecting personally on their graduate experience, their research and writing and data analysis experience, and what that's meant to them and the skills they've developed. I can see opening with that. If I was a graduate student, I might just do that and talk just for a moment about how personal and exciting this research has been for me. So those are 3 techniques, strategies of openings that you might consider. Now, that doesn't say you don't greet your audience. I would say if you're going to say hello and welcome, you might do that a minute or 2 after you take the stage and begin speaking. Start with one of these techniques, and then maybe as you get into your talk, then welcome people to the stage and to that room for the talk. So opening your presentation. So that's it for our techniques, our strategies for today, focusing on the vocals, on volume, and on getting your speech started. And that concludes the major portion of my talk up to now. We've looked at some perspectives, and you've learned about a few tools of the trade, as I call them. At this time, I invite any questions, comments, that you might have, perhaps some reflections of your experiences with presentations and public speaking that you'd like to offer us on any issue involving public speaking. So I think you have to turn on your microphone, and I'll be ready to hear any questions, or whether I do that or Aidana.
Yes, participants are welcome to ask the questions themselves. We have some comments for you. Oh, there was a comment about whether we have Toastmasters in Astana, but the other participant replied, yes, there is a Toastmasters club in Astana.
Two. As of the moment, there are two. One right here on campus at Nazarbayev University, and another Astana Toastmasters Club, which meets in the city somewhere. And I'm a member of the Astana Toastmasters Club, a fine group of young people who are very eager and very excited about developing their public speaking skills with Toastmasters.
Okay, there's another question from Aijan. Hello, Robert. As you have said about barriers that are prevented to perform successfully, how to eliminate shyness if you have a quiet and dull voice? If I try to speak loudly, I get the hoarse voice.
Use a microphone. That's the simple technological answer to the situation. It depends on the room as well. Sometimes there are air conditioners going and it's noisy, and even many people who speak softly can't be heard that well. So using a mic is one way. As for shyness, again, that will begin to reduce itself as you become more and more confident in public speaking. So it doesn't matter how shy you are, if you're introverted or extroverted, public speaking is a skill that you can learn and become very good at. So don't let your shyness or your soft voice get in the way. You can overcome all of those challenges.
Thank you. There's another question. Ayolo is asking whether is it possible to get a PowerPoint of a webinar? Yes, Robert will share the webinar, and we will send along with the Zoom recording to your emails as you have registered.
That's right.
If you haven't registered, you just see a post from the Facebook or Instagram, please go to the registration site. I will type it here. Once you have registered to that website, you can get all the webinar materials.
Okay, sounds good.
Another question from Diana. Can you suggest good books or any sources on developing presentation skills?
I have a whole collection of books in my file. If there's some way you can contact me, my email is at the end of this talk. At the last slide, my email's at the bottom. I can forward you a dozen books that you might want to consider, and I do have summaries of them all. So I forget most of them now because it was many years ago, but I do have a list of them, and I can give you a few recommendations, certainly.
Okay. I have typed your email also in the group chat, so everybody can see and debate.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
There was another question about the recruitment stuff, but yeah, this person will email me. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have the question. Hello, my name is Eileen. I'm studying at the Eurasian National University, and I have a question. I want to know how so we can speak, because we know that highest speed is 120 words per minute, but we don't know about low speed limit. As if we speak too slow, audience can lose the point of content. And can we vary the speed during presentation?
Okay, I missed the last part, but first I think you're asking me, can you speak too slow to the point where it's not effective anymore? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, good question. At what point do you become too slow? Well, I think I should qualify by saying slowly, but still very naturally, without becoming kind of a robot where you speak very slowly and have gaps in between each word. not like that, but it has to be a balance where you're still coming across as speaking very naturally, very in a communicative way, but still slowly so you can articulate each word as clearly as possible. And those numbers that I've given you is kind of the benchmark that you can work around. I don't think you should go down to 70 or 80 words a minute. That might be too slow. But it seems to be, in my training and experience, that around 100 to 120 words seems to be a very common range for good slow speaking, yet still very natural. And the second part of your question, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat that?
And can we vary the speed during presentation?
Can we variate, so diversify the loud and quiet speaking during the presentation? Can they diversify their, you know, the voice speed during the presentation?
Yeah. That's
or
all
should
about
be the same way?
No, that's all about vocal variety. Volume is one. The pace, the speed is just one of the many ways. There's volume, there's pitch, there's tone. Sometimes you want to quote someone and kind of use their voice and change your voice a little bit. So yeah, variety can be an important part of your presentation, even in academic presentations. If there's a point that's very important you want to get across, you'll raise your voice a little and you'll slow your pace down a little bit. So yeah, there's a whole collection of tools, of techniques that we can learn just on vocals alone. Good question. Other questions?
Hello, Professor. This is Kumar
Yeah.
from Astana.
Hi,
When I was doing my presentation, especially if I am more confident about context. Just now you explained this is for the overconfident. And then I usually try to speak slowly. If I'm more confident on the context, I speak too quick. So how I'm going to solve this problem?
Practice.
Do it unconsciously.
Yeah, you have to make a conscious effort to slow down. Think about that word per minute issue. You know something really well, you can speak about it very well, but your audience may not. If they're from all walks of life, you have to make an effort to slow it down so they can begin to understand all that you know about a topic. Again, comes down to practice. Good question.
Thank you.
So just before we go, I do have a summary coming up and a closing thought I'd like to leave you with when we do get through with the questions. So don't hang up yet. Any more comments, reflections, questions?
Hello, Professor.
Yes.
And my name is Dinara.
Hi, Dinar.
I come from China, and I have a question about this presentation. Could you please recommend some very good examples of presentation that other people did before, like we can watch it from the
Good question.
online?
I might have a few in my file from speeches I've made over the years. I'll see what I can dig up. YouTube is not bad. Sometimes I recommend people to TED Talks, which at times can be quite good, but other times not so good. So you have to pick and choose there. I'd have to select a few for you. But good question. A few examples of good speeches is something I could add as a supplement to this talk. Yeah, good idea.
Okay, thank you very much.
If that's all the questions, can we move on to the final part of my talk? Aidana?
I guess so. I cannot see any other questions.
Okay.
in the chat box.
Okay, let me move on to my last few slides and a final thought for our audience here today. So, as part of any good conclusion, there should be a summary, a review of what you talked about in your talk today. Remember, we began with why public speaking is such a big deal. It's so influential, so powerful because of, number one, the ratio, 1 to 10, 100, and secondly, the authority, the authoritative voice that comes with anyone speaking on stage. Then we talked about what public speaking is all about in terms of skill areas. You remember the three? Delivery, content, and structure. Yes, there you have it. Start learning something from each of these and you'll become a very good speaker. How to become a good presenter? A variety of ways. Read a few books, do some training, professional speakers, involve yourself with Toastmasters. There are more and more clubs happening all around the country, 2 here in the capital city and at least 6 or 7 more now sprouting out around the country. Those barriers, number one is the fear people have of speaking that has to be overcome, and sometimes overconfidence. People think they're going to deliver a good speech, but if they don't have some knowledge and background in it, they might not have. And finally, a few tools of the trade. We talked about vocals, about improving the speed, the pace of your speech so that it's slow enough to be very articulate and for your audience to understand. We talked about volume, how much information to put into your speech. Try to control the amount of information so that the speech goes smoothly and you speak slowly. And then there's the introduction, the opening to your speech. Be a little more creative and be remembered as a very creative speaker with an opening that will catch the attention of the audience. And a final thought. I'd like to, if anything you take away from this talk, think about learning more about this skill area, this communication skill area. Public speaking is something that not that many people really learn about much, partly because they don't know. And again, there's the fear and overconfidence. But as it affects your success as a student, it could have very positive effects. And as it affects your life, your career, and your job opportunities and your advancement in your career, being able to speak effectively and skillfully and with confidence can set you apart from 95% of all other people out there that you're working with. So do consider it as a future goal of yours to learn something more about public speaking. It's been a wonderful journey for me. I'm ever more confident in my speaking ability, not only on stage, but in any social environment I'm in, and indeed here on the video screen today. So my name is Robert Gordon. This was a talk about public speaking perspectives and strategies. There's my title, Academic English Instructor. My email is here, and I believe Aidana will forward it to all of our webinar participants as well. Should you have any questions, anything to follow up with, please feel free to contact me. I love talking public speaking and presentation skills. So thank you for your attendance today, and I wish you well in your future, your plans, your possibilities as a future students and in your job, and stay safe and healthy during these very, very challenging times. Thanks again, and have a good day, a rainy day here in the capital. I hope it's nicer wherever you are.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, dear participants, thank you very much for your attendance. I will send the email along with the video record and Robert's presentation by the end of this day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.